So today, there'll be a little bit of a change of scene, I hope. That I'm going to talk about applications, right? And hopefully this will, over the next several days that we have, right? Hopefully, all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle will fit. Yeah, you've heard some theory, you've seen some visualization, you've done some practicals. I'm going to try to talk about applications to the extent possible. I also try to connect these things, but I would really request you guys to keep doing this actively as you encounter new material. But even if I don't do all of it today, just because of how much we have done, but we'll make sure that by the end of the winter school, you will have made many, many more connections among the topics that you would have heard. Okay? All right. So I'm going to talk about telecom, but before that, I want to talk to you about this. This is a very old data set, and this was a paper written in 1977. This was about, there was basically a karate club class, and there was a bit of a rift between one of the students and the karate teacher, and the student went and started his own class, right? And the reason I'm just showing this is that, I believe that a picture is often worth 1,000 words. And the way this connects with you is that yesterday, Shaugata made a big deal about the visualization. And it's just interesting to note that the moment you see a picture like this, you can tell the story yourself, even without, me having to explicitly state it. You can clearly see that there are two groups. You can see that there are two centers, for the lack of a better term. I'm going to use this term very loosely because I think we understand this intuitively. And we can also see that there are some people who are kind of really on the fringe of both of these communities. You see, all these things you can just say by looking without even me making any special remarks about this, right? And so that's why this is, I think this is a very, very nice example. The fact that we've also set it in two different colors makes it amply clear. Yeah? And guys, please feel free to interrupt me anytime in the middle of a sentence even. I much appreciate that, yeah? It also helps us keep awake after a lovely lunch. This is the spread of a disease, right? And yesterday, Shaugata talked about epidemics and the spread of epidemics, and we've all been through, God forbid, COVID and all of these things. And you can see that, the thing that I want you to kind of just maybe appreciate is the fact that why is the network perspective important, okay? Suppose I have 1,000 people and I have a budget for 10 vaccines. Only 10 people I can vaccinate, okay? How do I choose those 10 people can easily be dictated by the picture that we see, right? So it's clear that instead of wasting all my 10 vaccines on the corner of the fringes of these little networks or communities or clusters, right? I would rather hit the center of these things, and then I know that I probably have done a better job or got more bang for the buck, as you would say, right? So if I only have money for 10 vaccines, then how do I smartly do that? Yeah? All right. Okay. So now, with that connection with the past, two topics, let's talk about telecom. Okay. So whatever I'm saying on this slide is just my way of saying it. It's not standard literature. It's not standard terminology. So let's just imagine everybody's making phone calls to everybody else, right? That is our setting. For the next whatever time, we're going to be talking about this setting. So all of you guys have heard about the term data mining? Are all of you also, you've also taken all those of you have taken a course in data mining? Okay, all right. So, like what I like to call this the microscopic view anyway, is that, so suppose I have lots of data about all you guys calling, right? And so what I may know is that I can take a microscopic view, which means I can, look at one guy, say Poojan, and I know that every Saturday night he calls his grandmother for 2 hours, right? So what I'm doing is I'm zooming into a person, and I want to really do a lot of things for them. I like to call that the microscopic view. That's data mining, right? And opposed to that, and what we are seeing and what we'll see and continually focus on, right? This is the lens with which we will see everything for these 10 days, is the telescopic view, where we zoom out and see, oh, these four are friends, they're always sitting next to each other, and that guy is always sitting, away from everybody else and so on, right? That's the telescopic view I get, right? And what is interesting is if you think about it, you think about a superstore. Yeah, think about a superstore. Suppose I'm a superstore. Suppose I am Big Bazaar. If you're familiar with Big Bazaar, yeah. And so what happens is that Big Bazaar, I have a lot of customers. Sometimes even families walk in. But when they buy stuff, do I have any idea of who's buying? I mean, how are the people who are buying related to each other? Absolutely not. Now compare that with a telecom. Okay, let's say I'm Jio, and all of you are on Jio, right? Now exactly I know who's talking to whom. So think about this for a pause and think. When it comes to understanding the relationships among my consumers or among my customers, okay, before the days of Facebook and WhatsApp and all of that, the telecom operator was actually the only guy who really knew how his consumers are interacting with each other, right? And that's a wealth of data, as now we all appreciate, right? See what Facebook did, sadly what Cambridge Analytica did, right? And all the bad things that happen, and there are of course many good things that happen, but all of that has become possible because of understanding, not just understanding, but analyzing and, God forbid, sometimes badly manipulating how your consumers are connected with each other. So I think, when we started off this work, when we were part of IBM, all of this is before Facebook, right? So all of this was not obvious. So we were trying to make a case that, it matters where the individual is located within the network, right? If the guy is at the center of the network, is at the corner of the network, he's talking to 2 people, he's talking to 2,000 people, all of that matters. I think you guys don't need any convincing, because you know about YouTube influencers, you know how much money they earn, etc., 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 right? So I think this is an easy sell for you guys. Okay, so what about telecom data? So telecom, every time any time a call is made, it generates in the telecom operator's backyard data warehouse a call detail record, a CDR. Okay, and the CDR is about 300 or 350 columns. Okay, but for our purposes, it suffices to consider 3. Who is calling, whom, for how long? Okay, and this, by the way, and all of this is anonymized. I don't even care what the person's name is, or it can be a number, I don't care. It doesn't have to be the real telephone number as well, right? As long as I have a number, it enables me to do what we are all in the business of for these 10 days, draw a graph, right? So every circle in this picture is a human being, and 2 circles are connected with a line if those 2 human beings are talking with each other. Okay. Now what I can also do is I can write some numbers on the lines, where that numbers may represent how long somebody is talking, how often somebody is talking, or a combination that you like. Fine. So this gives me a graph. And of course, if I just try to, so what happens is that you think about this. So 2 people may make 100 calls between them. So in the data warehouse database table, there will be 100 rows. But in the graph, there will be only 1 edge. So you can imagine that from terabytes of data, some sort of natural compression happens when we draw a graph from it. Yeah? Okay, but that doesn't serve our purpose, because like Shogada taught us yesterday that if I just try to visualize that whole graph, I'll see a hairball. He called it a hairball? What did he call it? You guys remember? Yeah. He called it a hairball. So I'll just see a mess, right? So it's clear that even though being able to draw the graph is the first part. But then trying to get insights from the graph is our business, right? That's the business we are all in. Okay. And so sometimes, of course, you'll try to visualize it, but sometimes you'll say, okay, I'll visualize it later, but let me see if I can analyze it for certain properties or things that may be interesting. Okay? So far, so good? All right. So this is our setting. and this is what we started. I'm going to present these ideas in a historical manner, in the sense that I'll present them almost in the chronological order in which they happened, because I think that will probably make a lot more sense to you. I mean, that's why I'm choosing to tell it like this, but we'll figure out whether it was a good idea or not after the talk, right? So here we are a group, within IBM. We are trying to study data that comes from a telecom operator. And the first thing that we saw was, okay, let's just try to understand the graph, because nobody, not very many people had studied just graphs at that point, and hardly anybody had studied telecom calling graphs, right? So you said, okay, what does a graph even look like? I mean, I'm having this millions of customers, right? And remember, this is like 20 years back. So even the kind of compute facilities that you see now, the ones then were completely, used to pale in comparison. I mean, you can't even imagine how limited they were. And so, and at that time, we were also trying to, we're part of IBM, so we had to say, okay, can we make business sense of this? Can we find practical applications of this or not? But this was our first foray into this. So before this, there were two significant pieces of work. Okay, one was that people, scientists from Yahoo, Alta Vista, these were all search engines of the yesteryears. Okay, early days of the web, and including some from IBM research in Almaden, they all jointly wrote a paper. Okay, and this really became a famous paper, circa 2000, which basically was the first one to tell what the whole web looks like then. Okay, so of course at that time they had to have all these. They had multiple machines and they were crawling the web and doing all these things. And right, this is like way old. So it was a tough thing to do. And they were able to analyze, and they said, look, you know what, this looks like a bow tie. Okay, and they came up with this name bow tie because they found that, and we'll understand the meaning of every term in this, if not today and right now, over the next few days for sure. But I can tell you, okay, so that is something called SCC. Okay, guys, strongly connected components. Excellent. Yeah, okay. So for you guys, strongly connected, so you have a directed graph. Okay, in a directed graph, suppose I have, in this little directed graph, suppose I can go from any place to any place else. By following the direction, I cannot violate the direction of the arrow. And if I can go from any place to any place, that's called a strongly connected component. So one graph may have multiple pieces where I can go anywhere here, but not from here to here, anywhere from here. So I can imagine that the graph is made up of multiple islands. And within those islands, I can move freely by following the direction of the arrows, but I can't jump across an island if there is no directed edge from one to the other. That's what is called a strongly connected component. Clear? So this in is kind of, look at the direction of the arrow. Somehow from that, there are many, now imagine that there are many web pages inside that in area, and you're able to go from those things, somehow you'll find your way into what is called the SCC. Okay, and of course within the SCC you can move anywhere because it's a strongly connected island. And from there you can move out, but you can't go back in. Okay. And of course there are a few other subtleties. You can see some things, little tubes going out and all of those things, but we'll worry about that at a later point, the details. I want to just say why this is called a bow tie model, because they saw that roughly the sizes of these in, out and SCC were nearly the same. And so they imagined that if I'm wearing a bow tie where the centerpiece is sort of slightly larger, but it won't look too ugly of a bow tie, so they called it the bow tie model. Okay, so this was a famous path-breaking paper in 2000. However, before that, AT&T Bell Labs, you guys know about Bell Labs? Bell Labs was an amazing place where they did some amazing research. That's where Unix came out of. Yeah, we'll forever be indebted to them. And they also were a telephone company. They were the research group of a telephone company, and AT&T was a telephone company. So what better place? They have the data, they have the scientists. So of course, very way back when, right? They actually studied all the landline phone calls that were made in the day in the continental United States, all long distance calls, everything. And they actually had 53 million vertices and 170 million edges. This is even before 2000. Okay, I think this is probably even before 1999. So this is sort of a little bit this thing. And they just said, okay, I mean, the first time somebody's looking at a graph, let's just see what can I say about the graph. Yeah, nothing as fancy as we can imagine today. So they found that, if I just go from a friend of a friend of a friend, okay, so what is a connected component? Connected component, unlike a strongly connected component, if it's an undirected graph, if I can go from all over and reach all the place, that part is going to be a connected component. Again, a graph can be an undirected graph can be divided into islands of connected components, and two islands are disconnected because there is no edge, no undirected edge which is connecting them. So in this they found that there was a giant component with almost 80% of the nodes. Yeah, I mean, now it all looks obvious, but when the first time they found it, it's kind of really interesting because it tells you that, when nobody knew anything, people would think, yeah, people are talking there and talking there and talking there. Who would imagine that, I can go from here to there and meet somebody in a remote part, right? So this was a really sort of interesting and surprising finding. So while we started on this work with Telecom, these were the broad two clear related works or prior art that was there. Okay, so one common thing to do, and one of the simplest things to do, and one of the first things to do is you see, okay, how is, everybody knows degree of a wedge, degree of a vertex, right? How many edges are going in or out of a vertex or a node, right? That's the degree of a vertex. So you see, well, how is the degree distributed? So I have 100 vertices. I just want to see what the distribution looks like, right? So people imagined initially that when you don't know something, imagine it's going to be normal. Why? Because you think of something as being random. Okay. Again, I'm not getting into the details because over the next few days, we will actually talk about the details of this, well and proper. Okay. Anyhow, I only want you to see here that somehow they had all this kind of a strange pattern, okay, which in a few days will not seem strange to you at all, is that they were all having this shape. Okay. Maybe I can just add one more line to this, is that what this is basically telling in simple terms is that there are very few celebrities. Yeah, there are very few Amitabh Bachchans, there are lots of Amits. Right? That's all it's trying to say. In that sense, it's not surprising. But what matters is how the shape is, and we'll talk, as I said, later on about the shape. But that's all I want you to take up with you. Okay. Say that again. Yes, this is a degree distribution. So how many people know Amitabh Bachchan, how many people know me, kind of thing. And there are how many, and so the number on the y-axis tells the number of, out degree, what is on the, I'm sorry, this is too small. But basically, you get the idea that, there's a small number. So look at the bottom of the tail, that actually shows all the Amits. Over there are all the Amitabh Bachchans, basically. Yeah. So we actually approached telecom operators begging them for data, and we were lucky that one of them actually agreed to give us anonymized data, but we had to actually go to their office and work with their data and then get out, couldn't really pull the data out of it. So we were lucky to get, we got data from about 4 different regions of a country, and some of them were, we got calls just made a week. In some case, we got a month. So we got these four data sets, right? You can see the details here. So for A region and D region, we got 1 month data. For B and C region, we got 1 week data. Okay, and then of course, right? If you all have dealt with data, one thing which is the painful, the heart-rending, heartbreaking part, yeah, all blood, sweat, and tears, is data cleaning, right? And if you want to deal with this, we just have to embrace it. Yeah, bite our tongue, do whatever, clench our fists and just do the thing, right? So without going to any gory details, one of the obvious things you would do is that there are lots of things which are called wrong numbers, right? So you want to definitely remove wrong numbers from the data. So there is no blessed method to say, oh, this is the way to remove wrong calls or whatever, wrong numbers. So we just said if anything is less than 10 seconds, we'll ignore it. Yeah, but there is no really no basis for that. Should we choose 5? Should we choose 12? There's really no good answer to that I know. Okay. All right. So then we saw the degree distribution, because we know that everybody first checks for degree distribution. This is the first thing we should also do. So we also did that. And sure enough, we found that it looks more or less similar to the ones that we saw before. Okay. So we thought that we were on the right lines. Okay. And again, very few vertices and these are all directed, because I make a call to him, there's a direction, right? So, yeah, so I should be clear. So the graph that you build from telecom, this kind of telecom data, in principle can be directed, but if I think about it socially, he is my friend whether I call him or he calls me, right? So depending on what analysis we are trying to do, we can treat the same graph as directed or undirected. So as we talk about the different examples, if I don't, please remind me to point out whether is in this setting, are we treating it as undirected or as directed? So here, since we want to separate the in degree from the out degree, right? We of course want it to be directed. So these are the plots for the directed version, because we are talking of in degree separately and out degree separately. Then we said, okay, let's look at a single vertex. Okay, for each vertex, we want to see how much is their in degree correlated with their out degree. Does that make sense? So I want to know how many people are calling you and how many people are you calling. How many people? Yeah, not number of calls. How many people? Graph people. So you can see that from 0 to 100, right? You can see that it's almost linear. So roughly, for all most normal people, the number of people you call and number of people you call are roughly the same. But after that, it goes boom, right? And if you see, that's kind of interesting, because what you see is you can see that there is here there are some people who have very low out degree and very high in degree, and you can see this also. So these people are not normal, right? They are somehow strange people. And of course, if you think about it, it's not surprising, because you have so many telemarketers, the people who pay you. Of course, they won't have that many incoming calls as many outgoing calls. So these are the people who pay you. Similarly, there are call centers whom we pay. So they get a lot of incoming calls, but they don't call out as much. So now, so sure enough, we found that, that this is what it's probably indicating. Now pause, think about this. We have abstract, masked numbers. We don't even know who this person is, where he or she lives, what he or she does. But imagine from this anonymized data, what kind of wealth of information or insights we are able to get. Okay? So that's pretty amazing. Not only that, it gives you an idea of how many people are probably playing that particular role. Right? So that was interesting. Then, bipartite graphs. We all know bipartite graphs? Right? We all did the bipartite graph layout also in Gephi, right? The event graph layout, right? Now imagine that you have a bipartite graph. Now what is a bipartite core? Well, it insists that everybody on the left hand side should be connected to everybody on the right hand side and vice versa. So we'll call that as a bipartite core. Okay? And so why is a bipartite core interesting in general in real life? Well, I could have doctors and patients. I could have buyers and sellers. I could have, suppliers and consumers, right? And so, so this was something, again, by the way, it was also there in the web pages that people did. When people analyzed the worldwide web pages, they found that there were bipartite cores. Yeah? Cores means little pieces of complete bipartite graphs embedded somewhere within the network. Okay? So we found that we also had them. So someone looks like when people are calling each other, they are also playing this kind of a role of being some kind of, a doctor-patient or whatever. So of course, doctors can talk to doctors and patients can talk, and that's why you see some some edges kind of violating the pure bipartite-ness. But the point is, such things, such things ought to exist, and sure enough they do, right? But now we just saw that yes, indeed there are like conclusive evidence for it. And I don't really care if you can read these scales or not, but the point is, of course, that larger bipartite cores will be fewer to find. Not surprising, right? And again, every time we are trying to make a case that maybe, if the telecom service providers, if we give this kind of data to them, maybe they can do something with it. This was yes.
What is larger bipartite cores? What do you mean by larger?
Large means like here the fan out being larger, there are very few like that. Fan out being small, there are very many like that, right? So if I say I want like, with 2 on each side, I get like 70,000 of those. But if I say I want like, 6, then the number is less than 500. No. So let's say bipartite. So suppose I have a bipartite core, right? So bipartite means let's say I have a 2 by 3, right? So if this number is 2 by 3, I'll find many 2 by 3 in the whole network, compared to I say I want 17 by 22. That's all.
You will find smaller things in large numbers.
So smaller things will be in large numbers. That's all we are saying.
So larger bipartite cores is the KMN is larger.
Yes, M and N are larger. Yes. And these 2 pictures are about fan in and fan out. So which I take left side or right side or whatever. That's all it's saying. Okay? Are we good? Everybody awake? All right. Now cliques, of course. Cliques, right? So cliques, we all know what cliques are? Yeah? Where everybody knows everybody else. Yeah? This already came up in something, right? In one of our previous talks? Yeah? On the first day? Yeah? All right. Good. So, similarly we saw cliques, and of course cliques of larger size are going to be very few, not surprising. And then we also looked for strongly connected components, and we saw that they also have this, the rates, all these plots seem to have this flavor that, there are few very big things and very many very small things, and the trend is sort of like this. Okay? All right. So we said, well, we had this model to follow. Before us, we had this World Wide Web work. So we say, okay, they have a bow tie model. Do we get a bow tie model? So we did the obvious thing. Let's see if it is a bow tie model. So this bow tie model, like I was saying, that was the in and the out for the World Wide Web, right? Actually, the out is it's almost twice as big as in. So the bow tie is not very pretty, technically. The middle thing is really large, anyhow. So that they call this the bow tie model. So what we found is that if we try to fit our things into a bow tie model, it looks really ugly. It's not really fitting. In the World Wide Web, they're almost equal, right? So we felt that, well, this is not great. Sorry? In and out means that so let's imagine there are lots of vertices, right? All the paths, I can't come back to the in part. From the in part, by following a friend, I can somehow enter this strongly connected guy. And once I'm from there I can go to other places, I can't come back in. Okay? Is that clear enough of a visual?
Yeah.
All right.
Out will have all those with the integrity 0, something like that.
No, out may have some ways to connect to other out people.
Okay.
Right? But they won't have a way to come back right into the strongly connected component.
The SEC is kind of a cut vertex kind of.
Yeah, one second. Let me do this. So what I'm saying is, suppose you have this. So all the arrows are going like this. Right? And here is the SCC. And once you enter this SCC from wherever, now within this everything is nicely connected as a cycle. Right? But once you go out, then again you may have a lot of things that you can do. Doesn't mean out degree has to be 0 or anything like that. But there is no way to go back into here. Is it slightly clearer? Yeah? Of course, yeah.
Not even the SEC you can't go there.
No, because the moment you can go back to SEC, that fellow will get pulled into SEC by definition.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay? Okay. So what we did was we still did an analysis of, but one thing I should say, it's very, you can always do, you can take any directed graph. You can always divide it into these zones. Okay, hear me out now. What I would do, I would, so let's say for now, for simplicity, I just have a small graph. Okay, so I can start with any vertex. I can see all the places it can reach. I can do the same with another vertex, and so on. Once I do that, I can always divide the graph into these three zones. Now, if the whole graph is SCC, then in and out will have 0. But if they are non-zero, I will know this. Is this clear? Yeah. So sometimes I may have some vertices which are only in. So what I'm saying is, if I do this, if I do some exercise, I will come to know whether how many are in, how many are in SCC, and how many are in out for any directed graph. So this in-out SCC is, I mean, the World Wide Web guys did it, but it's nothing unique to World Wide Web. It is something that we can do for any directed graph. Okay. So what we did was, we did the same thing for our directed graph. Okay. And now, instead of just looking at how many vertices are in, how many vertices are in SCC and so on, we said just on a whim, we said let's look at the edges that are in, both vertices being in, then it's an in edge. One vertex being in, another in SCC means it's an in SCC edge. In out edge, that means some of them are going directly. SCC edge, SCC out edge, and out edge. Okay. So just when you have these three divisions on sets of vertices, you can have so many combinations for the edges, right? And so we said, okay, let's look at that. And lo and behold, we saw that this actually follows, in our data, this gave a very clear pattern across these 4 regions. Remember, I took data from 4 regions, 2 regions for 1 week data and 2 regions for 1 month data. For all the 4 of them fell into this pattern. What is the pattern? The pattern is, if X is the number of in edges, then the number of edges inside the SCC is 10 times X. The number of edges going from SCC to out is also X, and you can see the other numbers right there. Okay, and this pattern fit all the 4 regions, which was of course surprising to us. Yeah, not that we could make any further sense of it, mind you, but we saw this for sure. Everybody with me? Any questions up to this point? All right. So we were still trying to, so remember, right, we are trying to justify how to make sense of all of this work, right? We are trying to say this should be, we are trying to say that, okay, finding this shape could be helpful. Maybe we'll know that where word of mouth advertising might work. We should know where should we start selling something because it'll percolate and it'll go in a certain way, right? And we said that maybe this is a good way of segmenting customers. So we're still trying to look for, valid use cases for doing this, which is otherwise, if I not say theoretical, at least empirical piece of analysis, which is purely, graph oriented, right? All right. Of course. So the thing that always came back to us was, all this is fine, but show me the real value. Show me the money, as they say. Yeah. How will I make use of this? So in the next phase, we said, okay, yeah, this is true. I mean, it is good to know all this. It's good to know this. I think when you start off, this again, maybe is just a view of mine that, yeah, when you start off, you want to just know how things are, right? How they are placed. You want to know a few basic things. And then, hopefully, we can find applications and get more insights about how we would use this information. Okay, so we dreamed up several business cases, which we'll now discuss, about how to make, hopefully practical use cases of this. Okay, and let's see if I can convince you in the next whatever time, if it works. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background about what was happening in the mobile telecom market when we were doing this. So today there are 2 or 3 major players: Airtel, Vodafone Idea, and Jio. Right? At that time there were many more. Yeah, because that was like a new market. And of course the competition, and that time very few people had numbers. So at that time the game was different. It's like, okay, how many subscribers can I get? Right? That was the game. And also remember, India has, probably still has, the lowest average revenue per user in the world. Okay? I suspect even less than Africa, but I don't know the latest on this. Yeah, I don't know the latest on this. Yeah, in Africa actually all this stuff was a lot more expensive than India. I mean, always. As far as I remember, this is always true. So what happens? What does it mean? Average revenue per user is low means that I may have a few consumers again who are having 5,000, 4,000 bill monthly. Remember, outgoing calls were not free in those days. Yeah, incoming calls were free. I'm talking about a different time. Maybe some of you were born then, but maybe not. So what do? Right? But it still made sense, as most startups do today, that it doesn't matter how much revenue I'm making. First, I try to capture the market, right? And so, but this is a problem for them. So they are trying to. So here are the mobile guys. They are trying to acquire customers by the bucket, yeah, by the truckloads. And then one of the question is that, yeah, but people are also leaving. They're also like, just like a sea, people are coming, but people are also leaving. And they were really not worried about the people leaving as much as, because that was the time when trying to acquire, some people are falling through the sea, falling through the cracks, they were not paying attention. And so one of the questions that we were kind of asking is that, shouldn't we be focusing on retention? Why? Okay. So one of the other data points we found was that when you onboard a new customer, okay, you have to give them a SIM card, you have to give them this thing, you have to do some, so there is a whole process to it, and of course they knew the costing of that. So in that time, I'm talking about around 2005, 2006, the cost of onboarding a new customer somewhere around 230 rupees. Okay. Now compare that with the average revenue per user you're getting. That's like peanuts compared to that. Okay. So the argument that, once we came to know this, the argument we're trying to make is, boss, you should really fix your customer retention. You try to retain your customers, because if they're going away, even if you're getting new ones or even you're getting the same one, the point is you are spending a lot of money acquiring them, right? So what we said is, we should really try to make customer retention a lot better, right? And so for this, we said, well, we should really do a lot of good, business intelligence. You should do a lot of good data analytics, graph analytics, so that we can design the right incentives and have people stay. Right? That was our tagline. One term I want to introduce: customer churn. So if I switch from Airtel to Jio, right, then I have churned. I have churned from Airtel to Jio. That's called churn. Okay. All right. Okay. So what we did was, we said, okay, let's handle churn, because churn is clearly an important problem. At that time, all the products in the market had churn analysis was there. There was software to do churn. But how would it do it? You would see how many times these guys had a dropped call, right? If you remember, in bad zones at that time, people would drop calls very often because there were not that many towers. There were lots of other challenges, right? So any customer would be really ticked off. Most of the time, my calls are dropping. I don't like this guy. I'm going to switch, right? So people would also call the help center. They would also know from their own data. So there was software that predicts churners, knowing that, this guy is like really upset because you got 25 calls in 2 days. This guy is going to leave. So let's tell him, hey boss, please stay. We'll give you 100 rupees discount or whatever. So there is software which used to do this kind of thing. But what was our angle on this? Our angle is, let's see, can we do anything social? Where does the graph come in? That was our angle. All this is fine. All this I can say based on all other standard tabular data. These many dropped calls, these many this guy is not making calls. That's also a hint. He's not using my chip, my SIM. Maybe he has another SIM that he's using. I would get panicky about that, right? So there were all these kinds of things they were doing, what I call standard analytics. So we said, okay, let's do graph analytics and see if it even works. If it even works, right? So we were first to really even try this out. So what was the model? Okay. So we don't have the content of any call or any SMS. Let's be clear. Of course I don't have it. What I do know is which are all the people this guy is called, that guy is called, she has called, he has called, all of this. Right? So let's say right now we are in December. Let's say we are in December. And in December, at the end of November, at the end of last month, I know that those 4 people have churned. They have left Airtel. Let's say I'm Airtel. I'm doing this analysis for Airtel. Then I know these 4 people left. Okay? I want to understand that their leaving, is it going to cause any impact for the rest of my consumers? How do I do that? Okay? I don't know what they're talking. They were not blogging then also. Right? Those days. So, what I do is, I say, okay, let me look at all the people they were calling. When do I look for that? Do I look for that in November? No. Why? Because by November beginning itself, they may have decided, I'm going to leave, I'm not even making calls using my Airtel SIM. So I go back. I go back to July, August, September, something like that. And I see all the people that these guys were calling. Okay? So now I'm building a graph. This graph you see is based on, so the I's here, the I's are initial churners. That means these are the people who churned, these 4 people at the end of November. But this graph is drawn from on July, August, September, October data. Okay? And these are the other people they were talking to. Now I have the graph. I have the graph. Now what I say is that all the people who churned in November, and I'll say that they kind of spread some kind of energy into the system. Yeah? Think of it as negative because we are talking about an unfortunate thing from the operator's point of view, the telecom operator's point of view. And how do I say, so let's say everyone gets 1 unit of energy. First question, how do I distribute this energy from all the links from her? Okay, she has 5 neighbors. Do I distribute it equally? In proportion to the number or duration of calls. That's exactly what we did. Makes sense, right? So we say in proportion, they gave out this. So this happens from all these 4 people in this graph, right? You can imagine this, right? I'm injecting a fluid, and that fluid is going to flow from these 4 nodes into the network. Can you see it? Now what happens? Other nodes are collecting fluid. So how do I make a model? I say, well, if they have collected enough volume of this fluid, which is above a certain threshold, they'll say, this guy may leave. Right? So we built, this is called an energy threshold model. Okay, it may have a fancier name, better name, it doesn't matter, but you get the idea. Right? So then what we did is, we saw this, okay, so now it's all going. Okay. Now just by defining the process to be this, there are 2 immediate consequences. What are they? Number 1, she may be talking to him and he's talking to me. She's not talking directly with me, but I still get the fluid. Because whatever fluid he receives from her, he again does the same thing. Okay? So this model has the capability of capturing indirect effects. Point number 1. Point number 2, she is talking to him, he is talking to me. I get fluid from both sides. Point number 2, the model has the capability to capture cumulative effects. Cumulative indirect effects, both. Okay? So we build this. Okay? And we compared this the first time, we compared this with the random churner model. How do we do a random model? We know that every month, let's say out of 100, 20 people churn. So if I did a random thing, I would be right with a probability of 0.2. Okay? So can I do better than random? That's what we checked. Because, of course, the operator would not share this kind of business sensitive information with us. So we had to build a baseline model for ourselves. Are you with me? So we said, okay, how well do we do compared to random? Okay? So now what happened was that we did this with many telecom operators across several countries, and what we found was that our model did as low as twice better than random to as well as 7 times better than random. Okay? But there was no way of pre-telling where we will do better and where we'll do worse, because there are too many factors, other factors, which will decide, it depends on how many consumers do they already have. Yes? Better meaning, so our baseline is random, right? So random means that if I know that your churn rate is public, so I know that 20 people churned, that's public information. So that I can baseline using that. So we did. So it would depend whether you're the telecom operator is a primary player, is a secondary player. How do consumers behave? There's so many other factors that of course we didn't. We just try to see, can we do this or not? Yes, sir. Please tell me your name as well. Shubhaman. Shubhaman.
So when one person is churning, I am distributing the negative energy in proportion to the weights to all its
Neighbors.
who has degree 1. What about degree 2 and
So whatever energy, so let's say that, yeah, so she gave out 1. Out of that 1, 2, he received 0.3. Now this 0.3 will again spread, treating that as 1. Okay? So everybody understands this model? Simple, intuitive, clear, right? Turned out that it was effective too. And we were kind of thrilled because we were able to solve a business problem, which we were looking for in terms of, saying, okay, we graph and we want to do this graph analysis and all, but we had to show something where we can bring practical value, right? So this was that. Now, again, I want to constantly remind you that here we don't have any profile information, right? We don't know anything. Is he a male? Is he female? Does he live in this area? What is the monthly salary? Nothing. Without that, we are able to do such a decent job of this. Yeah. I want to also make 2 quick points that, see, this was a very, very plain vanilla type model. So for example, I am saying that the threshold for everybody is the same for churning. But if you have a little better information, we know that we can do a lot better. We say, threshold for him is less, for him is more. We could personalize it and make fancier models. But of course, at that point, our idea was that does this even work, right? What is the other point? The other point, yes, one more point is that, look, we don't know the content of the calls. So it's not like she actually called and told everybody, hey guys, leave, this is bad, I'm ticked off, whatever. She maybe never did that. But still, this works. So I don't know, maybe because he just knows that she left, or maybe this guy's hearing that his friends are all saying that people, I don't know. We don't know what was actually driving it. All we were able to do is we could actually see the impact of it. But from a value point of view or from an application point of view, that was enough, right? But you can imagine that you would want to do, in-depth or deeper studies to actually understand what's going on, wherever that's possible. Yeah, makes sense? Good? Are we good? Thank you. Another one, yes. Sorry, you have to tell me your name, I forget.
Mano Prakash.
Mano, yes.
So what if 2 people, so let's say I'm also living, he's also living. So we are connected to each other.
Yeah.
How does the energy flow at that time? His energy will pass to me. I already have an energy.
Yeah, so it will pass to you, it will not matter.
Okay.
I mean, in the model, it won't matter. If you really want to make those edge cases, you can say, don't send it to somebody who's already churning. Yeah. That's also fine. So you can just remove those edges. Right. But turns out that in the broad scheme of things, it may not make too much of a difference. Assuming such cases are not too many. But it can be easily handled by cutting the edge between the two.
You had such cases?
I don't think we didn't bother to do this. Yeah, we didn't bother to do this, and it still won't. Okay, now another one, cliques. Okay, cliques are at some point you can say for telecom operators, it was like a very obvious thing and major bread and butter thing, and I'll tell you how. So I still remember, in the mid-90s, there was a company in the US, telecom company called MCI, and they had something called the Friends and Family Program. So what they would say, you call up MCI and say, please, put Mano and Shubman and Pujan in my Friends and Family Program, right? So I have to call up and tell. Airtel had a similar thing called closed user group when they launched, okay? And here we were saying that, why do you want people to call you? All the data is with you. The data is with you. You can say by looking at the click that, hey, boss, whatever calls you make within the click, I will discount them automatically. Why should you have to ask people? Right? In hindsight, it's so obvious. Why should I have you to call? Plus, not only that. So this month you want to say these 3, but somehow it happens that next month you are calling those 4 people because of the nature of your interaction or work or something changed. Why should you have to keep track that, okay, remove these 3 people and put these other 3 people or whatever? Yeah, it didn't make any sense to us. So our proposal was, you try to find out who all are talking in these cliques and automatically discount them. How will this help? This will help you retain customers. If I know this, people will not leave because you are taking such good care of me. This was our point. I'm not sure, I'm almost certain they never actually implemented it. But this was our selling point. I mean, this is how we were trying to sell them the idea that why this makes sense, right? So what do? We want to find, okay, so here you can totally imagine that, you're here, this red dot here, right? And you have all of these are your school friends and these are your college friends or whatever, and you're at the center or whatever. And then the trick is just to find these cliques and just do it. Sounds good, right? What's the problem? Right? Finding cliques, it turns out, is a very, very hard problem. You will keep trying combinations of all sizes endlessly. Yeah, it is a hard problem in the most technical terms as well as the non-technical terms. It's just hard, right? And I think it's even hard to approximate, but Mano would know. All right. Yeah. But again, another thing was, it was also interesting that you would get some people who are at the intersection of cliques. Yeah. I don't know what we'll do with them just yet, but just keep this in mind, right? Some of these people could be at the intersection of cliques. We'll see that in a bit.
One question, so the cliques change, right? As you move from one university to another.
Your cliques may get, yeah.
It's a dynamic graph kind of view.
Yeah. So what you do is you can always look at snapshots which you may update every 3 months, or every month, or every week, depending on how much computational power you have and how much movement you think you have. Right? So what you're saying is very true, but we said that, look, this is a practical way of dealing with this thing. Yeah? Okay. So now we have what? We know that we want the solution to a problem which is computationally hard. Okay? But we know that it has an advantage from a business perspective. What do we do? आता काय करायचं? क्या करेंगे? Okay, identify cliques is a very hard problem. Okay? My friend had a brilliant idea. Okay? And his brilliant idea is divided into multiple sub-ideas. Number 1, a clique of size 3. Not interesting. Because there will be tons of them, and if I'm just getting a clique of size 3, it doesn't mean great business value to me. Clique of size 200, maybe I can do something with it. Right? Point number 1. What he told me, Amit, large size cliques are interesting. This is point number 1. Okay? I agreed with him. So, what does that help? Does it help us? It helps us in the following way. If I say, I'm looking for cliques of size 20 and larger, what does it help? How does it help me? It says that anybody who has 19 friends, out. 19 or less friends. So, in the graph, if I'm interested in cliques of size 20, if anybody has 19 friends or less, I can simply remove them from the graph. So my graph size went smaller. Right? Then he made the second, and in my opinion, an amazing leap. He said, if 2 guys have to be part of a clique of size 20, they have to have 18 common friends. 18 and the 2 of us 20. Right? So, if I check whether the 2 of us have 18 common friends or not, if we don't have 18 common friends, then this tie is meaningless. not be part of that clique of 20. She may still be part of some other clique of 20, some meme of some other 20, but this is not happening. Cut this. Okay? If I cut this, suddenly it turns out that her degree is 19, my degree is also 19. Then we both go out. Right? So the first one is called degree-based filtering, where if anybody is less than 20 friends, remove. Because of this removal, some people's further their degrees will fall. They'll get removed. After that, we do for this, how many 18 common friends? Remove these ties, but removing these ties will again reduce the degree. So keep doing this till boom, 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 things fall. Then I can solve it. Yes, Mihir.
So let's say that we have found 18 common friends between us, right? So that does not guarantee that there's a 20%.
Absolutely not guaranteed, because this thing which you tried with two, we'll try with some other two friends, and if all of that survives, only then will that pass as a clique. So that will happen much later. But just this filtering process, you keep doing this, then whatever you're left with, you'll be good. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, is this completely clear, guys? Degree-based filtering and neighborhood-based filtering, shared neighbor filtering. Yeah, degree-based filtering means I can remove the vertex. Shared neighbor filtering means I can cut the edge. Yeah, and I keep doing this repeatedly. And once you stop, then whatever you have, you're done. So will you please do this for this graph on paper, you guys, all of you? I just want to make sure that we are all awake here. Yeah. And in this graph, I'm saying that I want 4 to be I'm looking for cliques of size 4 and more. Okay. So I want you to tell me exactly in what process will this happen, in what order. So will somebody walk me through it? Again, please remind me your name. Nidhi. Please tell me what will happen first. What am I going to do? Which filtering?
First, actually the click is AB.
That you can see. But I'm saying, how will the algo work?
First, actually you have to remove all the edges.
No. First, what should I do? First, I do degree-based filtering. Degree filtering. First, I'm doing degree filtering. So what happens in the step of degree filtering? Your good name, please. Disha. So Disha, what will happen if I do degree filtering?
All the nodes having degree less than 4 are removed.
Are removed. So who will get removed? Who will get removed?
A, B, node A.
Less than 3.
We are looking for cliques 4 and larger. So every node has to have at least 3 neighbors, right? So every node who has a degree less than 3 will get removed. Less than 3. So who will get removed?
Node E and G.
No, wait. What is happening in the first step? First step. We want to understand the process. We want to understand the algo, right? Answer you told me. You can see it. I want to make sure that we understand the algo. So who will get removed? E and G. Why will E and G get removed? Because they both have degree. They have degree less than 4, less than 3. Okay. What is that?
F will also be removed because if we remove E and G, F and 3 have only 1 degree, right?
So after this removal, now F will get removed. Right? The order is important. After these guys get removed, then we see, F will get removed. Will anybody else get removed at this point? No. Then we'll go to shared neighborhood based. Once we exhaust degree filtering, we go to shared neighbor. In this case, of course, it's a very trivial example, so nobody will get removed in SNN filtering, right? Or will somebody get removed? Actually, if I'm doing them in sequence, what I'll do is I'll do the following first. I'll remove E and G, then I'll go to shared neighbor filtering. In shared neighbor filtering, I'll see that F is connected with C, but they don't have enough common neighbors. So I'll cut the edge and then I'll go back to degree filtering and then remove F, right? If I'm doing them sequentially, I can do it like that. Or you could repeat it to degree filtering, then come to this, do this, then. So you can do it whichever way, but you understand that it'll kind of work out.
So in the degree-based filtering, rather than saying okay, we remove less than 3, right? What if we say that we remove nodes with degrees not having greater than 4?
Okay. So when we are saying we are interested in cliques of size 4 or larger, that means that for somebody to participate in a clique of size 4, that fellow should have degree at least 3. So if that fellow doesn't have degree 3, meaning he has less than 3, that's all. That's all we are saying.
So sir, but if we do it like greater than 4, right? Greater than or equal to 4. So then
Greater than or equal to 3.
greater than or equal to
That's fine. The same thing. Same thing. Yeah. Yeah? Is that clear? Yeah? Okay. Right? All right. So that works out. Right? EG will be removed first, then the edge FC can be removed, then the node F will get removed, and we are done. We'll get the answer. So this was a brilliant idea because what it turns out is that a lot of real world graphs are what are called sparse. Okay? So you can see that the theory just says that look, this is a very hard problem to solve. But the practice tells you that in real life you get a lot of sparse graphs. So in sparse graph, if you're not interested in small size cliques, suddenly we have a solution that actually works in practice. Of course, what is unknown is, given this graph, should I use my minimum clique size as 13, 23, 67? That is a bit of a hit and trial. But still, the fact that I have a way of solving this is clearly valuable, right? And I want you guys to really pause on this and think about this and reflect on this for a minute because so some problems which are known for decades, sometimes even centuries, known to be computationally hard, when you look at the same old problem from a different lens, you may find that by changing the problem a little or by changing some other aspect a little, you may be able to solve it. Say that again.
In the case, we basically use the fact that it's fixed parameter tractable. If you fix the parameters, then it reduces from finding a general clique of size something.
True, but it worked because in real life the graphs that I encounter happen to be sparse. Otherwise, it would not work. So theoretically, it may still not be fixed parameter tractable if I don't make any assumptions about the density on the graph. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you're trying to look at a problem, many of you will be working on some practical settings of the problems, right? I mean, you guys are. He's working on something theoretical. He's working on approximation algorithm. So he likes it pure and, he'll do the parametering and all these proofs and whatnot. But if you guys, for example, we are still yet to talk about the details of what you guys are going to do. But for those of you who are looking to solve practical problems, my only point is that, it always helps to revisit it from your practical standpoint. Yeah, because there may be some assumption in that biological setting or telecom setting or whatever that setting is that may just change it such that either you can change the definition of what you're looking for. Like I said, I'm going to look for cliques only larger than something, or the fact that it turns out that it's a sparse graph. And if both of these things are helping, we found a solution, right? So I wanted to have this open mind whenever you're faced with an application and you feel that you have hit a wall, because when you look at related literature, they will just tell you this is hopeless. Clique finding is not even approximable. Forget, just go home, right? But here was my friend, he said, no, wait, let's take a look, Amit. And he just solved it in front of me. Yeah? So, one more point I want to make, right, is that over the last 2 days, we saw a lot of things which are, how things are when you look at it from a pure point of view. Now, sometimes I may also change the definition, right, or introduce a new definition by changing a known definition, introducing a new term, changing the definition to make it more practically viable. We will see clear examples of this also. I want you to be very sensitive to this because this also will be very useful in terms of, to deal with whatever it is that you're going to be facing in the things that you're going to explore. Okay? Yeah? All right. Here is another kind of community. Okay? This is the opposite of cliques. Cliques means what? I know these 4 people. Not only do I know these 4 people, I know that they know each other. That is a clique. Right? Star is the other opposite. Everybody knows, like, I know the central guy. Yeah? Maybe the chief minister of some other Timbuktu also knows the central guy, but we don't know each other. Right? So here is a highly asymmetric relationship. So you see that the hub knows the spokes and the spoke may know the hub, but the spokes don't know each other. So what can the center be? The center could be somebody of influence. Like I said, it could be Amitabh Bachchan, it could be Narendra Modi. Yeah, if it's all incoming. If it's all outgoing, the fellow may be a telemarketer. He's calling about it. Please join, please buy, loan, whatever it is. Right? So, now this is also greatly useful. Now again, back to my point. I don't have any idea of the demographics, but when I look at calling pattern like that, I can get a pretty good idea of what that guy is up to. In this particular case, by the way, all these colored pictures are from real data. Okay? So, all the blue colored ones are subscribers. So, whichever operator we were doing this analysis for, the blue ones means that fellow is a subscriber of the operator, and all the pink and red one means that he was non-subscriber. Okay? In this picture, what you can't see, and I apologize for that, is all the arrows are actually going out. So you can almost guess that this guy is actually a telemarketer for the operator, because he's calling all non-subscribers to say, bhai, subscribe. I mean, it's just a guess I'm making, but I'm tempted to imagine that I might be right. Because everybody is calling, he's a non-subscriber, except that green one, who's a regular customer. So that may be just friends of his. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah? A picture is worth 1,000 words? All right. Are we good so far? So, okay, star. But things will never be perfect star-like. So how do I identify stars? So here is the case. Now, we are faced with a new thing. I will have to now come up, in the cliques it's very clear. That's a perfect clique. Even if one edge is missing, not a clique. Yeah? This classical graph theoretic definition of a clique. Stars, not defined. Pure star is there, but yes.
But there is some sort of a center. So maybe
There's some sort of a?
center in a star.
Yes.
So then some centrality type notion can be.
Yes, but centrality notion means I'm only interested in a local thing. So I don't even have to go for any complex measure. I just want to see one guy and his or her neighborhood. Right? So now what I'm saying is that now we want to come up with a new definition. Okay? So let's say that star actually means, and let's say that in some remote book in graph theory it says a star means there's a node, he has these neighbors, and no two neighbors should be connected with each other. But I find that as too stringent a definition for a star. In fact, some of you could have argued that Amit, clique is also too stringent. Just the fact that एक edge नहीं है, it's still very useful. It's very practical. If you would ask that question, I would agree, and we will talk about that very soon. Okay? But for now, let's come back to this. What are we saying? Okay, I want to come up with a definition of identifying a star. I need a definition. What is it?
If a node has a really high degree and its neighbors have low degrees, then that resembles somewhat of a star.
Okay, so here is a first thing. So suppose this guy has high degree, and the neighbors have. So Poojan is saying neighbors have low degree. Neighbors have low degree. Is 2 okay? Degree 2 okay? Is this a good star? Yeah, clustering coefficient. Okay, you remember clustering coefficient? Have we talked about it? Okay, we haven't. Okay, my apologies. Okay, let's talk about clustering coefficient. So let's look at this guy in the center. He's our focus, okay? And he has 4 friends. We want to basically know how many friends of his or hers are friends of each other. And for that, there's a measure called clustering coefficient. Okay? So what do I do? This guy, what is this guy's degree at the center? What is his degree? Her degree? 4. 4, that means what is the maximum number of possible edges that the friends can have? This, 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 and this. Right? Why? Because I'm not really interested in the center guy now. I want to know what is happening with that fellow's neighbors. If the neighbors are well connected, then I'll say it has a high clustering coefficient. If the neighbors are not well connected, it is a low clustering coefficient. Okay? So what I can say is, so I can come up with a measure for clustering coefficient, which will say that how many possible number of edges are there, how many edges are there compared to what is the maximum possible I can have. What is the maximum possible I can have in this case? With 4 neighbors, the guy in the center, right? With 4 neighbors, what is the maximum possible number of edges that this could have? 6. So I'll say, so denominator is going to be 6, right? Now I will say that suppose only 3 of those 6 are there, right? Then 3 out of 6 will be the clustering coefficient for which guy? The guy I erased, the guy in the center. So this is the definition of clustering coefficient. What's your good name, ma'am? Julie. So what Julie is saying is that if I want to see how good any particular vertex is to qualify to be a star, I can look at the clustering coefficient. If that clustering coefficient is lower than a particular number, I can say this guy is a star. That's kind of what she's proposing, right? So that's one possibility. Now, okay, so, all right, so what we did was, we wanted to look at, we looked at something quite very similar to that, but not quite the same. Yeah. What we said was, so that guy is a perfect star, that guy is an imperfect star. Imperfect, why? Because some of the spokes are talking with each other. Okay. And we said, and by the way, clustering coefficient is a perfectly valid measure. Okay. One thing that clustering coefficient and I would really see this before I say this, so I'm thinking a little bit. The number of spokes matters. Okay? Intuitively, what I'm saying is, intuitively, how do I compare 2 stars? One guy has 5 spokes, other guy has 100 spokes. Maybe among the spokes 2 or 3 are connected, here maybe 20 are connected, right? Maybe this 20 guy, maybe it's a better, I mean, we'll have to have it some measure will prefer this, some measure will prefer that. So we have to come up with the right kind of measure, right? What I'm really trying to motivate more than anything else is, when you look at these cases, whatever use case you're going to have, you should see, do you want this guy to have more number or this guy? What makes intuitive, business, or domain specific sense, right? And based on that, you should define your measure. That's all I'm trying to motivate. I'm not saying whether this might work as well as what I'm going to say. Yeah, but that's what I'm just trying to say. Understood? So what we did anyway, so what we did is instead of just sticking with the clustering coefficient, we went ahead and said, okay, what is the, and maybe this is coming from a slightly different context, but let's just go ahead with this, okay? Is if I think of whenever I have a hub in the center, yeah, the hub is actually responsible. So imagine this to be a computer network. What is the responsibility of hub? To take messages from this guy to that guy to this guy. So actually, the workload on the hub is actually n square, right? Because he's allowing pairwise communication among all the spokes. Okay? So if you use that kind of, I guess, an argument, we found that this is a reasonable measure. That the communication workload on the guy, if it was a pure star, is to handle order n square things, n into n minus 1 by 2, right? And out of that, whichever the spokes, whatever number of spokes, pairwise spokes are connected, that much load is taken away from the hub, right? So number of edges there, we said we'll just remove those, right? Yeah. So we chose to define starness in this way as opposed to the way Julie suggested, because we were coming from a slightly different angle. Okay. All right. So in the perfect star here it is 15, right? In the imperfect star it is 10 multiplied by 9 by 2 minus 3, so that's 42, right? So if you look at this, it looks like the bigger imperfect star is even quote unquote more of a star. Right? Oh wait, is it the other way around? Lower the number, better the star? Higher the number, better the star. Right? Higher the number, better the star. Perfectness. That's what I'm saying. Because the size matters. This is exactly what I'm saying. Right? So it depends. I'm not trying to defend this metric. What I'm trying to say is, when you're trying to solve a practical problem, based on your situation, you may decide that since it's a bigger one, I'm okay to have more perfection and still call it better because it looks more like a star to me, because the guy has many more followers. Even if some of those spokes are connected, then somebody is just having a trivial number of 6, 7 guys and nobody's a big deal. Right? Yeah, everybody with me? All right. So we came up with something called the star value, which is just a slight manipulation of the communication workload. But we normalized it in such a way that for a clique it is 0. Why? Because the clique is the worst kind of star you can have. So we made sure that clique of any size, we adjusted it so that clique of any size should get a value of 0, regardless of size. And it becomes a better and better star as the degree also grows. So that means if I have 2 hubs with unequal, one with fewer spokes, one with larger spokes, right? And they are both perfect, then I want the one with larger spokes to have a larger star value. Okay? We wanted to define it in a way that this happens. And this, I think, may not happen with the clustering coefficient. Yeah? Because this is what was our motivation. Is that clear, guys? Yeah? All right. Now, like I said, 5 minutes back you could have stopped me. Amit, clique is too stringent. If I just drop one edge, right? What do you mean? It's not a community. Yeah, I would say you're right. So we said, okay, then let's look at dense. If something is dense enough, guys, it's okay. For practically, I'm looking for people who are well connected. I'm not insisting really. Cliques is a natural place to start, but that's not the end. Right? So we said, okay, let's look at dense communities. Now, actually, again, from real telecom data, unbelievable. We found somewhere there were like 129 people where everybody knew 18 others. Right? The data just showed this. So what is our setting? How do we make this case useful? We said, you know what? I have these millions of subscribers. I should identify such pockets of interest. Go to the marketing department, say, look at these out of the million people, at least I'm saying look at these 129. Now go deep into them, see what we can sell to them, right? So sometimes our job can just be this, that at least we are telling you where to focus. It's a needle in a haystack problem. We are saying from this needle haystack, I'm giving you 17 needles, just look at these 17 needles and see what you can do with this, right? So we said, okay, let's try to identify dense communities. Now, I don't know what these are. We never came to know what these are. But imagine that you knew that all of them are playing golf or they're playing something, so we could sell something. Once you know what they're doing, you at least have a hope of what you can figure out what you'll sell to them. Yeah? So, so maybe clique is too stringent, right? So let's say that we want dense communities. Now we all have an intuitive idea of what we mean by dense. We mean that, among the vertices there are many more edges, right, opposite to sparse. Then we would call it a dense community. But then, of course, if we want to calculate something, we need to define it. So let's define it as follows. So first of all, we know what an induced subgraph is, right? We talked about this yesterday. Yesterday or day before? Day before, right? So where we said that if you have a certain set of vertices, the induced subgraph means that once you choose the vertices, you have no choice in what edges you choose. You have to choose all the edges that those vertices actually accommodate. Yeah, so that you know. And now we will say that the density of a subset is, I'm looking at some subgraph, the number of edges divided by the number of nodes. Yeah, the number of edges divided by the number of nodes for that part of the graph. So I have a full graph. I want to look at any subgraph. What is the density of this subgraph? Number of edges in this divided by the number of nodes. Let's say that is the definition of density that we will go with. Okay. And I said that I want the densest subgraph of this graph. That means I want the one, like if I keep doing this for all the subgraphs, I want the one which is the most among them. Okay. So this is the problem I want to solve. Everybody clear about this? Yes. All right. So Charikar actually showed that you can compute this problem in polynomial time. Okay. And he had some, he has I think a linear program for that solution. But here let's talk about a simpler algorithm. So what I'm saying is, so he also gave actually a greedy heuristic which says it will be a 2 approximation. That means whatever you're going to get is going to be no worse than twice as bad as the best solution. Okay, but the algorithm is far more, let's say, intuitive. So what do? I start with, what am I looking for? I'm looking for dense subgraph. Dense means in terms of, if I'm fixing the number of nodes, I want the number of edges to be as many as possible. That's what I want. So I start with a full graph. For the full graph, I can calculate total number of edges divided by total number of vertices. So I got my f of S0, right? Now what do? I delete the vertex with the smallest degree. Yeah, because that may be the one that may be spoiling things or whatever. Let me anyway delete that, and then I'll get f of S1. Yeah, I can keep doing this process all through to the end, and once I'm completely done, I can see fs0, fs1, fs2, so on till fs and fs1. Pick the one that has the maximum value, and I'll be good. Okay. So yeah, and there are other versions. Like I said, like we had this thing about clustering coefficient or the way we define starness. Similarly, there are other ways of defining density. You could use in the denominator. You could use total possible number of edges, or you could use a different problem altogether, which says I want to maximize the minimum degree vertex in a graph. Right. So there are many alternative definitions. You can pick what you like. Or whatever your situation demands, and you could do that, right? So this is what we did, and we found this pretty dense community in the real data. Okay. Now let's look at another practical problem that was again. again, it was present in those times. I don't think it's really valid today. But what used to happen in those days is people would, let's say that I have a prepaid SIM. Okay, I would walk into a store and I would say, and what the store guy would say is that if you buy a new SIM instead, your call discounts or your calling rates are going to be better. So even if I have, let's say, in the Airtel SIM, buy a new Airtel SIM because you will get a better deal. Okay? Now, why was this happening? Now, our understanding is that that store guy would get an incentive from Airtel or whosoever based on the number of new connections he or she sells. So he is incentivized to do that. Okay? And there are better calling rates. So, and if I go in as a customer, I feel this is going to be better for me, I will do that. Right? So when this happens, Airtel will think it lost one customer and got some another customer. But the truth is, it's the same guy. So this phenomenon, we call it internal churn or rotational churn because these things are not really changing, right? And it's very important, we felt, we're making a case for this, that it's very important that real churn should be distinguished from internal churn. You should not, because you'd make the wrong conclusions about how your business is going if you cannot distinguish between these two things. So where does network science come into this? Okay. So we said that if the number changes, but your calling patterns will roughly be the same. So if the number of people and your frequency of calling them is roughly the same for one SIM that went out and another SIM that came in, chances are within a degree of confidence it's the same guy. Right? And of course, I could make this technique better by knowing before that there is another guy who's a friend of this, who have common friends and they have this thing, but their calling patterns may be different. So I can put some checks and balances to increase my degree of confidence that, yeah, it's actually the same guy who has left, who has come in. The one who's left who's come in. So using this, one could detect internal churn. So here was another business case, right, which we felt could be solved using a network science approach. Yeah? Then here's another one. So all of you, I don't know if you still get calls, but we used to get a lot of calls in terms of saying, oh, switch to Airtel, switch to Jio, switch to Vodafone, switch to Idea, whatever. And what we felt was that there's a lot of wastage when this happens. What we felt is that when you do some targeting, like let's not just be random about it. Let's do it in a slightly smarter way. So we said, suppose I have money to spend on one call, okay? And I have two situations, A and B. So the circles, the dots, the red ones are my own subscribers, okay? The square is from a competitor. So I have money to make one call. Will I call the guy in A or will I call the guy in B? Why B?
Because it's already surrounded by people
Who know each other, right? So it feels like if I look at B, the B guy has social connections in my network. And he's outside, but his friends are in my network. Whereas if I look at A, he's just making random calls. It may be making just business calls or, tell him whatever other calls. I mean, there's nothing to kind of pull him in, right? So for example, if I targeted the B guy and then said, look, I'll give you an automatic discount based on your click behavior, blah, 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 I can actually get him into my thing, right? So this was our point. So even when you're trying to acquire a potential target, we should do a slightly better job of whom you're targeting, right? So broadly, the statement we were making is this, that maybe this even to today, that people who give major telecom bills, the telecom operators treat only them as being platinum customers. Okay. So today, of course, everything is free, but there was a time when only outgoing calls were free and only incoming calls were free and outgoing calls were charged. Okay. So when that was happening, somebody who gets a big monthly bill, they say, oh, you are our platinum customer. But what we thought, even at that time, and we are saying again, is that what people were missing is that what if I'm getting a lot of incoming calls, right? Suppose I'm in the airtel, I'm getting a lot of incoming calls, but I'm generating revenue for that guy, even though my monthly bill is 0. So if I switch, that fellow is now going to play cross-connect charges. So by the way, two telecom operators have certain agreements which are unknown to us based on whether two within the network guys are calling or outside network are calling, right? So it is important for a business to know what is called as a social value of a customer. In today's day and age, this is very well understood because of these social influencers, and we know how much targeting, all the YouTubers that go about it, how people who are making videos, hotels and all give them free accommodation so that they put, I mean, all this is known now, right? But this is all to make a case for this, that you've got to understand what social influence a consumer might have. And so you should not just see what is the monthly bill this guy is paying. So if he's paying a high bill, he's a great customer, otherwise he's not. That's not true, right? The other thing we saw in the data was that there were some people who were, so you can see this 2 or 3 clicks, some people were between 2 clicks, right? So of course we don't have data, so it could be one guy's set of doctors, lawyers or engineers or whatever it is, and these guys sitting in the middle, then maybe they are a very good place to do some kind of viral marketing, right? Maybe it's a good idea. So if you seeing these patterns, then we should treat those guys as somehow special and see what again say all this, give the list of such people to marketing and say, okay, what can you do with this? So these were all the kind of arguments we are making, that look, if you take a social network analysis point of view, you really can learn a lot about your consumers, and you learn things which you don't learn through traditional means. So nobody is saying stop doing what you're already doing. You're saying complement it with a network point of view. Yeah? Wear the network science glasses and relook at everything and see if you can do better. Okay. So all this was all talk in terms of telecom people just doing, talking to other people and so on. Then we said, okay, what can you do if you have even more data? Meaning, suppose I know who is buying what. Not only do I know who's talking to whom, suppose I also know who is buying what. Can we do better? Right? So for example, which communities are interested in a particular service, or which products are not. So in this case, the red circles might mean products and the blue might mean people, right? And if all the lines are going only from blue to red, what do we get? What industry? Who is buying what is what industry? Amazon, Flipkart, right? I just know who is buying what. That would all be this bipartite graph. And of course, I have not yet shown the edges among the people, right? You with me, guys, right? Yeah. So now this is the setting that we have. I mean, I have purple edges saying who is talking to whom, and I have green colored edges saying who is buying what. If I look at only green edges, it's like Amazon, and there's people who bought this also bought those kind of recommendations, right? Because I don't know anything about how the people are connected. But we made a case that, well, in the case of telecom operators, if the telecom operators are selling value-added services, all these yellow squares could mean a value-added services like ringtone, wallpaper. We were thinking very trivial in those days because that was the only thing that was available. But today, if you look at Facebook, WhatsApp, and X, all of these have exactly this data. Who's following whom, and who's blogging on what, or who's posting what kind of pictures. You just see, this is what it is, right? And we know very well that if you have both these types of data, you can do jolly well, right? You can do a lot. So, but let's start simple, right? So what are we saying? We are saying that, let's be clear of what these two things mean. The purple edges means that I am familiar with this person. Yeah, I know Disha. Doesn't mean that we have the same interests, right? There could be Yagnesh, right?
Yes.
I don't know Yagnesh, but our interests are the same. That's also possible. So Yagnesh and I are similar, Disha and I are familiar, and maybe Mano and I are similar and familiar. Right? We may be similar and familiar. And of course, there could be some which are no. So now there are certainly 4 types of, I will not draw those edges, but there are 4 types of relationship, let me just say. Right? So the point was that where do I do viral marketing? So at that time, by the way, we used to also read a lot of articles, some which would say, oh, this viral marketing was a great success. And another article in the same issue of the same magazine would say, oh, this bombed badly, it didn't work, blah, blah, all those things. So it got us thinking that why is that the case? Again, the telecom data also showed that there are some communities which just talk together. Doesn't mean that they buy together. Okay? So that gave us this thought that, okay, so we can't assume that just because, and this is true, when you look at your own cases, you may find that you have some childhood friends who are your childhood friends, but you really may not have, other than the fact that you really like hanging out with the person, you may not have any other common interests per se. And maybe that you have many more common interests with people you met later in college or something. It's entirely possible, right? So kind of our broad idea was that, look, so there should be some way to identify or distinguish between communities. Communities, what we are saying, first of all, people are familiar. That's why you'll get a community first of all. But once within this familiarity, I should not look at communities which don't have much similarity among them. Because if I try to do viral marketing there, it is of course going to bomb. So, if we have some trick of finding, separating the communities which are both, so we call this, by the way, we call these communities like-minded. Okay, that's the term we call them. So if we find communities that are like-minded and that I try to do viral marketing, I'm much more likely to succeed than if I go after communities which we know are not like-minded. Okay, so you said okay, so let's sort of try that. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit of a detour, and that's why I've changed the background a little bit. Just to, some of you know about data mining, some of you don't, but I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. So for all those of you who already know this, please bear with me. Okay, so let's imagine a visit to the supermarket. Okay, and the supermarket has this whole bunch of items, yeah, which they sell, yeah, and you, when you walk in, you buy a certain subset of those items, but you are buying these items in that single visit. So that's called a transaction, right? You make multiple visits to the superstore, each time buying a different set of items. Those are multiple transactions, right? So now you can imagine that each transaction is a row, right? And each row contains a subset of the complete item set I. Okay, all right. So what do we want to do? We want to analyze these transactions. So you go, you buy this, I go, I buy that, Amitabh Bachchan goes, he buys that, Shah Rukh Khan goes, he buys that. So we have lots of transactions across lots of people. One person may have gone multiple times, and all of that is also allowed, right? And the total set of items is I, and the total set of transactions is D. D is the full database, okay? And we want to know which items are being bought together. That means people who are buying bread, are they buying butter also, or are they buying jam also with that or what? So we're really interested on the item side. But in order to figure out which items are being bought, we're looking at people's transactions. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So one question you would ask, oh, does bread imply butter? That means if somebody buys bread, does it imply that that person will buy butter? That's what we want to know. These things are, by the way, called association rules. You've heard of them?
Yes.
All right. So we want to find how to identify association rules. So look at bread. Bread occurs in 2 transactions, T1 and T4. Butter occurs in 1 transaction, T4. So bread and butter together occur in 1 transaction, right? And so what we have is, so we have this thing. Let's say if I want to look at bread, implies jam, I'll say, I look at the number of transactions which both of them occurred divided by total number of transactions. Why am I doing that? That is to check whether this item is statistically important or not, statistically significant or not.
So
Okay?
it might happen that two things are always bought together, but the number of transactions
Are small, in which case I'm not interested, because then I say, well, it doesn't make business sense for me to invest in how do I plan to sell them. Exactly, right? So this being together is frequent if the support is large enough, then I know that this is statistically significant. Is there a point? Alifia, you want to make a point? Okay. So I want to know whether this is statistically significant. Now, the confidence actually tells me how confident am I that somebody, if they buy bread, are definitely going to buy, not definitely, with what likelihood are they going to buy butter? That comes from confidence. So I look at the transactions in which bread is being bought, and I look at the subset of that in which butter is also being bought. Because that will tell me how confident I am. If it's bought 90% time, I'm like, okay, this guy is, the next guy who walks in, 0.9 chance is going to, if he buys bread, 0.9 chance is going to buy butter. If it is less, it's less. Everybody? Okay? Okay. So this bread implies jam is what is called an association rule. An association rule has two properties. One thing is called support. The other thing is called confidence. Of course, rules which have both high support and high confidence are preferred. Okay. Okay, so we understand support, confidence, and if somebody meets the support criteria, it's called a frequent item set. Frequent item set means, look, forget whether bread implies jam or jam implies bread, but jam and bread together, they are occurring enough number of times. So that's what is called a frequent item set, because it passes. So what you do usually, support, you put support and confidence basically become some thresholds. So there are algorithms which will say, look, I want minimum 2% support and I want 60% confidence. Give me all the rules. So the algorithm will go and boom, 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 give it back to you. Yeah? So we always are interested in, this is called minimum support and minimum confidence. And once you set those parameters, you can get all the rules. The system will just spew out all the rules for you. Okay? Right? So just to quickly summarize, I have a set of items. I have a set, a transaction will be a subset of the items that I buy. I will not buy the whole thing, right? And the complete set of transactions is D. And we will say that A implies B. That means there's an association rule where A implies B. And this rule is true with this much min sup and this much min conf. If it is above that threshold, whatever I have set, then it's going to come out as a rule, otherwise not. Now, coming back, what are we trying to do? We are trying to find like-minded communities. Like-minded communities mean, number one, that they are familiar with each other. Number two, they are similar to each other. Means they are like-minded, which means they have common interests. Okay. Now, how do I do that? So suppose this is the social network. So C1, C2, C10, all of these guys are actually consumers or customers. And this is how they know each other. And P1, P2, P3, P4 are products. And each row here tells whether C1 bought P1, yes. C1 bought P2, yes. C1 bought P3, no. C1 bought P4, no. So this is telling what all everybody bought. Okay. So this is saying who is talking to whom, who is buying what. Purple edges, green edges. Yeah. So it's the same picture, just drawn differently. What do we want to do? We want to find like-minded communities. Now, when will I call some community like-minded? Is when they are buying enough things together.
We can give weights to the edges.
We could give weights to the edges, right? So let's see how we do that. So what we say is, instead let's look at, for each product, let's draw the induced graph based on the product. All the people who are buying that product, I'll include only those vertices for that graph. So P1 practically everybody bought. P4 very few people bought. So whoever bought whatever, that's the graph is going to look like. Is that okay? Is that okay? Yeah? So I just flipped it a little bit. So from this information, what I did was, only for the yes guys, I took those vertices. So if I look at column 1, P1, I can see C1, C2, C3, C4. I mean, except C5 and C6, everybody's in. So my first graph, except C5 and C6, sure enough, everybody else is in. That's what I did, right? Then you can see P4, only C2, C3 and C5 are yes, everybody else is no. So I get this fourth graph. Yeah? Now what I want a like-minded community. That means number 1, it should be a community. Number 2, it should be like-minded. Like-minded means I can say they should have bought one product together, but that sounds too flimsy a rule. Maybe they should buy 3 products. Maybe they should buy all the 4 products. That's again up to us. Threshold setting is always up to us. But let's say for this little example, we'll say that if they buy 2 products, we'll call them like-minded. 2 out of 4. Yeah, but we can set it to whatever we like. Okay. Now, now we will say that the cliques means I will call something as a, now I'm flipping the problem a little bit, because what I'm saying now is that if there's a community, then that whole community should come multiple times. Hear me out. So, what am I looking for like-minded? Not among people. I'm now looking for like-minded communities. Okay. So, suppose I have one little community. What is the smallest community I'm interested in? Triangles. Means it can be a triangle, it can be a clique of size 4, clique of size 5, whatever. Okay. But so long as it at least is a triangle, means at least 3 people, there is a triangle, then that triangle is a like-minded community, provided it's buying at least 2 products together. That means if I treat P1, P2, P3 and P4 as transactions, and what is the item here? The clique is the item. I flipped it. The clique has become the item and each product is becoming a transaction. Okay. So now I need to just check whether any clique is becoming a frequent item set or not. Is it frequent based on a particular support threshold? My min-sup I'm setting as 2. Okay. Confidence doesn't even come in the picture right now. Right? So if I look at P1, now P1 is what? Transaction. This transaction has what items? C1, C2, C3, C3, C4, C8. Are you with me, guys? Yeah? Are you with me? Is the flip clear? Disha? Yes, okay. So P2 is again saying C1, C2, C3, C5, that's a clique of size 4, and C6, C7, C8, and P3 and P4 and so on. Yeah? Let's make sure that pictorially they make sense. So if I look at this C1, C2, C3, yeah, we can see the triangle. We can see it in P2 as well. We don't see it in P3 and P4. Right? So C1, C2, C3, that triangle is there in these 2. So we can see that. Now C2, C3, C5, C2, C3, C5 is of course there in P4. It is there in P3. It is there in P1, but in P2, but P2 it has even larger thing, like C1 is also included along with these 3 guys. Right? And it is missing from P1. So I think you can see that. You can notice that in P2, that item is actually different because it's actually a superset of the both C1, C2, C3 as well as C2, C3, C5. It's a bigger one. Yeah? Okay. So we treat each clique actually as an item, and we perform frequent item set, pardon the typo, and support is 2. So we found these guys as frequent item sets. Right? And we notice that C4, C9 and C10 are not part of any frequent item sets. Okay. Now let's just go back and look at this picture just for a second. Okay. And what we notice is that if we just looked at communities, we would have found C1, C2, C3 and C5 to be one nice community, and we've gone and targeted it, and we would have found C6, C7, C8 and C3, C4 and C8 and whatever C1, C5, C10, we have gone and targeted these communities as we may have wanted to. Right? If we did not worry about whether they are like-minded or not. Because the structure of the graph would have only told us this much. This is what we know based on who's talking to whom. But based on who is buying what, we are able to filter and do hopefully what should be a better job. And now you see that C1, C2, C3 and C5 is a like-minded community and C6, C7, C8 is a like-minded community. But if you looked as purely communities, you would have found these, the ones at the bottom. And right? And that's actually, these pictures are a little bit different. Okay. Now let me tell you what some of the terms here are. Like-minded communities, you know, like-mindedness is just some measure of similarity among them. Okay. And modularity is just telling you how good a cluster or how good a community is. If you remember in Gephi, again, modularity and all, you will learn over the next 2-3 days. For now, just suffice it that you remember in Gephi we clicked on modularity, boom, it gave us communities, we got nice colors for separate communities, right? So this is some number, the larger the better, right? And like-mindedness, of course, the larger the better. And what we see is that with that, when we did that, so with like-minded communities, we got more like-mindedness. Interestingly, we also got better modularity.
So naive algorithm was better at that.
Sorry?
In this case, our naive algorithm would have performed as well as this one.
No, naive algorithm is what is here.
But there we find the click. No, we see that the clicks are the most like-minded communities.
Like-minded ones are on the top. These are just communities, not like-minded.
Yeah.
So these are communities which you have found, in ways without using like-mindedness, just like that. Just by looking at who is talking to whom. Above, it is looking at who is talking to whom and who is buying what. So can you just repeat your comment?
Basically, in this case, it's basically like, the same as the clicks in the graph.
So they are cliques because we are insisting that the community should be a clique.
Oh,
Remember, in the definition, we said that we are going to be looking at communities which are cliques. Right? But suppose you have a more relaxed definition, then you predefine whatever that definition is. But get each product to be a transaction, get each community to be a item, and do the same thing. In this case, for ease of illustration and concept, we said let's just stick to a clear clique so that the concept becomes clear. Does that answer your question?
yeah.
Okay. Right? Now the fact that like-mindedness of that is higher is not surprising because this one didn't even account for it. What is somehow interesting is that the modularity of that is also better than this, maybe because all the stuff that did not fall into a proper community was discarded. Maybe that's why even the modularity of that graph is better than this. But maybe we should not read too much into the modularity part for that reason. Okay, but the fact that the like-mindedness is larger is what we're looking for. The fact that there is a community, the fact that it's familiar, that's true because we started with first defining key cliques. Means we guarantee that first of all they are familiar because that's when we are taking them as groups. So familiarity is guaranteed. How many of them are actually also similar? That's what we are going to use this process for. So we know that whatever we are going to be left with is both familiar and similar. And now we can use these guys to do viral marketing. Okay. So we just were trying to, compare these things, and you can see that you can probably get large communities. If you look at the green part, right, the green part goes farther to the right, which means I can get large communities of familiarity. But if I insist that they should also be like-mindedness, maybe the community sizes I will get will not that large, because you can look at the, and this is far more to the left of something like this. But it's much more likely to be effective, right? Because we know that these guys are like-mindedness, whereas these guys are definitely not. Does that make sense? Yeah? Now, how does this help in doing viral marketing? So we said, well, okay, so we actually built a little bit of a software around it. So what we said is, okay, you get all the graph data, then you divide it into communities. Now all these like-minded communities will be of different sizes. Now based on the size, you may decide a budget of how much you want to spend on doing viral marketing in that community. And there is another thing which is just a subtlety which I want to just maybe mention it, although it's not there on the slide. Is now what happens is that you can also do a little bit of analysis and see that in this community, after this one guy buys, other people buy. Or after these two guys buy, then everybody buys. So you can find out who are the key individuals, which may be more than one, in every like-minded community, and allocate a budget to target them accordingly. Right? So you can do your budget allocation. There will be some default allocation that the algorithm does. And then you can manually, some human can change it. He says, no, I want to do more here, less here, whatever. And then you can actually run a viral marketing campaign. Is the motivation for all of this clear? Yeah? Okay. All right. So with this, we come to the end of the telecom part of SN.